Do you each have a myth about introversion that you want to bust today?
I guess mine, like I brought up earlier, is that all introverts are like super shy. So like some introverts are perfectly good with public speaking. Like in our book, Sam would be a good example. She's an introvert, but she can do her speech perfectly fine. And it's really Niles is the only one that struggles with it.
Yeah, I think mine, I'm going to go back to leadership, right? It's this myth that in order to be a leader, you have to be an extrovert or you have to act extroverted. For an introvert to lead, they have to put aside their introverted strengths and they have to act extroverted.
Hello, and welcome to episode 151 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we will air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. David and Joshua Boroughs are a father-son writing team from Houston, Texas. David is the author of the Extroverts Guide to Elevating Introverted Leaders in the Workplace. He is a retired professional engineer and corporate leader, now focusing on his family while pursuing his passion as an author and artist. Joshua is a high school student, and Anxiety High Volume 1, There Is Nothing Wrong With You, is his first book. He's a typical teenager who spends his spare time with friends, playing video games, running, and now writing. David and Joshua are introverts with a desire to help others learn how to be authentically happy and successful while at the same time championing cultural change so people of all personality types feel like they belong. All right. Welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, David and Joshua.
Thanks, Dave. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here too.
Awesome. And we're going to get into a book that you've written together, and that's very exciting. Along the lines of introversion and embracing your introversion, and as part of the title, there's nothing wrong with you. So we're going to get into that. But before we do that, David, let's just hear a little bit more about your story. You're an introvert champion. I've been connected with you on LinkedIn for a little while. So tell us about your journey and discovering your introversion and then becoming a champion for other introverts.
Sure. Probably like a lot of people on your show are a lot of introverts. When I grew up, we didn't talk about introversion, extroversion, personality type. I had no clue what it was. I'd never heard of Carl Jung. I'd never really heard of Myers-Briggs or any of that before. And in fact, I didn't really know about any of it or understand any of it until I actually started working in corporate America. So up until that time, I was kind of blissfully being my quiet self, and I was able to be authentic and things were working out well, High school went great. Of course, I did live in a very small, remote place, which probably helped from an introversion perspective. Lived on a small farm, spent a lot of time by myself, which was cool. So I was alone a lot, but from my perspective, I was never lonely. And it was kind of that idyllic, setting from my perspective growing up in rural America. And getting into college went fine, did well. When I got into corporate America as an engineer, things were also started out well. I thought things were going great. I was really focused on my customers, doing my job as an engineer, learning what I could learn. And I love being an engineer. I love the technical details of it. I love really focusing on my customers and helping them out. And then one day I was talking to my supervisor, trying to figure out, why I wasn't getting promoted. And, we had this discussion. And what I realized during that discussion was he had this expectation that I changed my personality from this quiet, reserved, think before I speak, contemplative person to more of an outgoing, outspoken person. And his expectation was I was going to make that change. And I really it was the first time where I felt like there was something wrong with my personality just because, of who I was. A little bit later, I got the chance to do this Myers-Briggs assessment. That's when I learned I was introverted. And when I went through the assessment, that all felt fine. I felt like an introvert and I was cool with it. Didn't really have a problem with it. But I'd started down this journey of kind of trying to figure out who I was as an introvert and how I fit in the corporate world as an introvert. And I spent a long time trying to fix myself. It was kind of that thing where you're told there's something wrong with you and you kind of accept it and believe it. And it took much of my 30-year career to kind of figure out that there was nothing wrong with me. I was perfectly fine as the introvert I was. And in fact, I wasn't really going to thrive unless I embraced that introversion. So when I retired, I wrote a book about my time within corporate America as an introvert. And, instead of writing a book from one introvert to another introvert and kind of telling introverts how to cope in corporate America, I decided that the message really needed to be different. It needed to be an introvert sending a message to the extroverts in corporate America. And so I wrote the book and I titled it The Extrovert's Guide to Elevating Introverted Leaders in the Workplace. And that's kind of the first thing I did after I retired. I really dove into writing this book. And it kind of chronicles my life and my career. And it's really focused on helping bust the myth that introverts can't lead. And the epiphany I had later in my career was that I could work on myself and I could be the best introvert in the world. I could be a top performer, but I was still fighting this bias that exists within corporate America that as an introvert, I was really never going to be accepted in the ranks of leadership. And the epiphany was, hey, unless the people in power know there's a problem, they understand how big the problem is and are willing to change it, personality type bias and discrimination within the workplace isn't going to change, right? And so that was kind of my mantra moving into writing this book was what can I do to kind of move the needle, level the playing field, and really help the people in power see that there's a business case for change. There's a need for change. It's the right thing to do. And, get as many people on board with that message as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we think before we speak, and it's a gift because we're deep thinkers, a lot of great things come from that. But in the scenario you described, even if you wanted to change that, you couldn't, and you wouldn't want to change it because it's part of what makes us great. And I love that you're taking the approach of, we really have to have more conversations around this, that it's not going to change, but we shouldn't want to change it because it's a good thing. At the same time, we need extroverts too. We need introverts and extroverts. We need understanding that goes along with that.
Yeah, and I'm a total believer that if you're an extrovert, there's nothing wrong with you. If you're an introvert, there's nothing wrong with you. No matter where you are on that personality type spectrum, you're normal. And we all have to come to that common belief and agreement that we're all normal. And we're normal being our authentic selves, not necessarily fitting in as a stereotype.
Yeah. So let's just talk just a little bit about your book. I know we're going to talk about the book that you and Joshua have written, but let's just talk about this book really quickly. So what makes a great leader? And why is how an introvert approaches leadership maybe different from an extrovert's approach?
Maybe to flip that around on you, what I'll say first is one thing that absolutely doesn't make a good great leader is personality type. So you can be an extrovert and be a great leader. You can be an extrovert and be a terrible leader. You can be an introvert and be a great leader, or you can be an introvert and be a terrible leader. So I believe that personality type has nothing to do with how good or bad a leader you are, even though our culture kind of teaches us something different than that. In my experience, I had great extroverted leaders, I had great introverted leaders when I was working. And the people who really I felt were great leaders were the ones that created a culture where I could really be authentic, where I could leverage my strengths as an introvert and I could be my authentic self. And when that happened, I was more productive. I did a better job. Things went better for me and for the business. And I think that, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, really. It's really about creating a culture where no matter who you are as a leader, you let people leverage their strengths. And those strengths don't necessarily fit a stereotype. They're not always the same, and they're mostly person to person dependent. So that's what I think it takes to be a great leader.
Okay. And then along with this, what you're talking about within the culture, you do a lot of work with belonging. So tell us a little bit about what belonging is and why our personalities are part of this, an important part of this conversation.
Yeah. So, we talk within the corporate America, diversity, equity, and inclusion are big messages, right? And in the book and writing articles, a lot about belonging, because I really believe as introverts, belonging is really important. So as a leader, you can create a diverse workforce made up of a lot of different people that represent a lot of dimensions of diversity. And you can even have the goal of including everybody, right? Making sure that everybody contributes. But depending on your approach, you can do it and still do that in a way where people don't feel like they belong. So you can have an environment that's diverse and inclusive, but you still have a large percentage of your population or your employees that don't feel like they even belong there. And the reason is because you're often trying to get them to fit a stereotype, trying to get them to fit in. Fitting in is different from belonging. In order to fit in, you really have to change who you are to meet an expected norm or to meet a stereotype. And with belonging, all you really have to do is be your authentic self. So leaders who can really leverage that perspective and create an environment where people can be authentic, where they can leverage their strengths, where they're celebrated for leveraging their strengths, are typically places where you're going to find more joy in the workplace. People are going to be more productive. And especially as introverts, when you can find that place where you can feel like you belong as yourself, it's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that's a quick summary of your first book. I've been reading it and very much enjoying it. So let's get into the second one and that you co-wrote with Joshua. So Joshua, tell us a little bit about yourself and, so far how you've embraced your introversion.
So originally I thought that I wasn't an introvert because there are a lot of stereotypes that introverts just have like no social skills whatsoever. And I'd like to think that I'm at least somewhat decent in social situations. And one day I got into a debate with my dad on the way home from school. I went all the way home and even until into the living room. And we decided to take a couple personality quizzes. And on every single personality quiz that I took, it gave me the results that I was in the majority percent introverted. And then my dad told me that it's on a spectrum. So there's no you don't have to be completely extroverted or completely introverted. You can be in the middle. So we think that I'm probably slightly on the introverted side, but I'm not completely as far as I thought you would have to be if you were an introvert. Now in society today, I haven't seen that much oppression, I guess. Maybe I've been sheltered, but I feel like introverts get a decent chance. So I've just been embracing it whenever it comes up.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. You're not going to get away with that conversation having your dad, I'm sure. And it's a beautiful thing. There are a lot of misconceptions, that every introvert is shy. Some are shy, but I definitely believe that if you understand who you are, you can overcome shyness if that's something that you want to do. And there's a lot of great things that come from it. So let's talk a little bit about that. David, what's a strength that you have because you're an introvert?
One of the things that for me, it's really this ability to kind of think through scenarios. So this is one of those things where it's probably a strength and a weakness at the same time. But I'm a deep thinker. I really think through all the scenarios. And for a long time, my career as an engineer, I was a high reliability safety system engineer. So one of my jobs was to think through all the bad things that could possibly happen and make sure they never happen. So that skill that I had was very suited for that. Now that I'm retired, it's a bit of a mixed bag, right? Because you don't want to be you don't want to be creating scenarios and multiple plans for everything that you do on a day-to-day basis or overthinking things. So it's definitely been a strength for me historically within my career. Now that I'm retired, I'm struggling a bit to kind of let go of it because I need to let go of it. But I would think to me, that's one of the things that I've really found as a strength, that ability to kind of think deeply and to think through all the specific scenarios that could exist.
Okay. And are Are you finding ways to put that into now your retirement career?
Well, I mean, I think that if you think about writing a book too, it can be good or bad, right? So like if you think about things like copyright, you do a lot of planning and you get the resources, you go through and make sure everything's footnoted and annotated. You make sure you've gotten permissions, but at the same time, it's easy to overthink it, right? You can go through a lot of worst case scenario thinking and with copyrights that you don't really can't control because until you get sued, you don't know if you met the standard or not. So that's a scenario where it helps because you're thorough, but at the same time, you tend to worry more about it than you probably should.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Joshua, it's your turn. Is there a strength that you know that you have because you're an introvert?
I like to plan ahead, which helps me a lot with school. I like to get schoolwork done as early as possible. It helps me especially because I get sick a lot, which means that I have a lot of makeup work to do. So when I plan ahead, it helps make like the days coming back from when I miss school a lot easier to manage.
Okay. And so the next question I was going to ask was needs. So like that could be both, like your strength is planning, but you also might have a need to plan. Is there another need, Joshua, that you know that you have because you're an introvert?
Oh, I like just a lot of alone time sometimes. Like, I don't know, like I can be in social situations perfectly fine, but afterwards I'll want to spend time by myself just doing like a quiet hobby.
Yeah. Okay. And the needs questions next for you, David. Is there something that you realize, hey, this is a need I have as an introvert?
Yeah, maybe it goes back to belonging, right? Because so a lot of people assume introverts don't need to belong because we don't like the social gatherings. But I think the misnomer that many people have is belonging is important, just as important to introverts. We just do it differently, right? So it's my core group, which is my family for the most part, and a few close friends. I really need those people there with me. And if I don't have them, I struggle. So, that from that belonging perspective, I really still need my core group of really deep relationships for me to feel like I'm 100%.
Yeah. And I think a key word you said was deep. So we absolutely need relationships, but we need some deep connections. We think deeply and we want to have some deep conversations. We want to have other folks in our lives too, but those deep relationships are important. And so it's normal for an introvert to have a smaller circle of deep relationships that are extremely important to them. And again, none of this is good or bad. It's understanding that, hey, this is what I need, and it's very normal. And then, so on this show, we talk about strengths, needs, and then we try and bust a few myths. Do you each have a myth about introversion that you want to bust today?
I guess mine, like I brought up earlier, is that all introverts are like super shy. So like some introverts are perfectly good with public speaking. Like in our book, Sam would be a good example. She's an introvert, but she can do her speech perfectly fine. And it's really Niles is the only one that struggles with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mine, I'm going to go back to leadership, right? It's this myth that in order to be a leader, you have to be an extrovert or you have to act extroverted. So for an introvert to lead, they have to put aside their introverted strengths and they have to act extroverted. And I think it's almost a misnomer to call it a myth, because a myth is one of those things where some people believe it. A lot of people just know it's just, not true. It's almost a societal misconception, right? Where the majority of society still believes that if you're introverted, you can't be a leader. And I'm all about breaking that bias and breaking that myth because it's doing us a disservice.
Yeah. So introverts can be amazing public speakers. They could be amazing leaders. And to me, it's like not a question of if, like people say, or, can an introvert be a great public speaker, or can an introvert be a great leader? And it's like, no, it's just the how could be different. How are they going to do that? And, I had a different podcast today, and we really talked about that. I enjoy public speaking, like Joshua is saying, but I know that I have to prepare a lot. I have to prepare ahead of time. And my extroverted friend or colleague might not need to prepare at all. They might just get up and give a winged speech and everybody loves it, but that's not going to be me. I'm going to need to prepare to give a good speech. And then I might need some downtime after, and I might need to plan how that's going to work.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So, all right. So we talked about David's first book. Let's get into the second book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You wrote it together. Tell us a little bit about the book, Joshua.
So it's about this introverted kid in high school named Niles, and he gets bullied by students and sometimes by one of his teachers because he's quiet and sometimes just doesn't know what to say in situations. And the book follows 1 week of his school life as he prepares to give big speech at the end of the week to help his friend run for student council president and all the struggles that comes along with that.
And let's see, the title is Anxiety High, Volume 1, There's Nothing Wrong with You.
I was going to say, so one of when I retired, I had kind of this vision in my mind. I was going to write some books, and one of them was the Extrovert's Guide. That was kind of the one I knew I was going to write, and I did first. But I wanted to write these teen books, right? And then initially I thought they would just be graphic novels because I also do the artwork. And Joshua, he loves graphic novels. So I thought it would be a great way to connect with teens. And when we started writing it, it kind of took a different form, right? It became this cross between a novelette and a graphic novel where we have it's more of a story, but at the same time, we still have the images in there to kind of help people relate the stories and kind of give people a mental picture of what's going on. So, we sat down and kind of started brainstorming it and came up with the story, divided up the different parts of the story. We wrote our parts, and then we came together and had to do a lot of editing work because, sometimes when you write parts, they don't always hook up together. And, just from my perspective as a dad, I'm sure there were times when Josh, he thought it was probably more work than it needed to be. But as a dad, it just made my year probably to have Josh there with me working on this labor of love that I had this vision in my mind about what it could be. And when we finished it, it was so much better because he was involved than it ever would have been if I would have tried to do it on my own, because he has this perspective as a teen that I lost, right? And I'm just so proud of the book. I think it's just an awesome book.
Yeah. I was able to read the whole thing, and I loved it. So, Josh, what made you decide or agree to co-writing a book with your dad?
So he proposed the idea to me at first, and I didn't really want to, but originally I thought this would be something good to put on my college applications. So I tried it out. Originally I thought, I'm not going to put that much effort into this. I'll just do the bare minimum. But as it went on, I started to get more and more involved because I wanted to put something that I wanted to make something that I could proudly tell my friends and other people at school about.
Great. And you should be proud.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, and it was more than just writing the book too, because we did, with the exception of the legal review, which we had a lawyer do, we did all the work ourselves. So we did all the artwork. We did all the configuration. So Josh did most of the configuration work to convert it from, a Word document into the book format, the configuration on Amazon. So there's a lot of work that we did together to publish the book. So in addition to writing, it's more of a writing and publishing effort that it was just an awesome experience. So
that's wonderful. So in the subtitle, There's Nothing Wrong with You. Joshua, did you feel like there was something wrong with you at some point?
To be honest, no, that title doesn't apply to me. It's targeted towards this specific book, I guess, is targeted towards it's targeted towards teenagers who might think that there is something wrong with them because they're introverted. And then it's the first one in a series. So they're all going to have something some positive affirmation towards introverters as the subtitle, just telling them that they don't need to be worried because there's nothing wrong with them. They're not alone in this. And yeah.
I know that me as an introvert, I personally have a lot of feelings that for a long time, those feelings were real feelings, right? They manifest themselves physically. And I thought that I spent a lot of time trying to make those feelings go away, trying to make those feelings not be there. And when I finally accepted the fact that they were normal for me, things got much better, very quickly. So I, as an adult, used to be a teen a long time ago. I actually do kind of resonate with the title very much so, because even in corporate America, I felt like there was something wrong with me because, like I said earlier, a lot of my leaders kind of told me there was. And, that's a message that we want to get out there, is that regardless of where you find yourself on the personality type spectrum, whether you're very introverted or very extroverted or somewhere in the middle, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly normal, and it's perfectly okay to embrace who you are and kind of where you fall on the spectrum. And if you're introverted, doesn't mean you can't be student council president, because you absolutely can. If you're extroverted, you can, do the same, and you can do absolutely the same thing, right? So it's disconnecting this idea that if your personality type is connected with leadership, when in reality, all it has to do with is how you manage stimulation and how you recharge your internal battery. And when we can all come to accept that, we'll be in a better place, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I was definitely in the place where I thought something was wrong. Why can't I be more like that person? Why can't I easily have conversations, that kind of thing. Definitely it's started for me in college. I got a degree in psychology. I got a master's in counseling. I was starting to figure out, but I was probably in my late 30s before I finally just understood, hey, not only is there nothing wrong with me, there's very good things about me because I'm an introvert. There's some strengths. And I'm so happy to hear, Joshua, that you really are already on this journey and you don't have to be in your 30s, 40s, 50s and figure out, oh, there's something great. You're already realizing that. And that's what we really want to do is start these conversations early. And these books are going to help people do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. and that's kind of why we wrote this as volume 1, with the idea that we would write these additional volumes and, move into different storylines. So the second volume is tentatively titled You're Not Alone, right? So and we kind of frame it at the end of the book as we move into the second title, where we have a character that kind of feels like she's alone in her struggles as an introvert. She's not getting in our first book, Niles gets a lot of help from his family and friends. The second book, Ruby, who's the character in that book, will probably not get as much help from, she'll struggle. She won't have that family support, and she'll have to look elsewhere and figure that out. But
okay. Is Niles going to return, or he was just in the first book?
I think the characters all kind of continue to play a role. So the characters, Mr. Cobb, I think you're going to see him again, probably. We'll have to do a lot of brainstorming, figure out. We haven't written or brainstormed the second book. You're definitely going to see Sam again. You're going to see, Miss Sweeney and the counselor, and we'll introduce some new characters as we go along. I think you'll continue to see the same characters. The format will definitely stay the same. So every book will cover a week in the life of a student, and it'll focus on a different student in each volume. But the other students will still be there, kind of in the grander scheme of things in the storyline.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, the sooner we can help people figure out that we have unique gifts and they're gifts, and there's nothing wrong, the better. I had a guest on. She wasn't a coach for introverts. She helped with work-life balance. She, was a life coach, and but she was also an introvert, and she had a client that was around 80. And when she was working with her on challenges that she had, she realized this person doesn't understand their introversion, and that misunderstanding of introversion, as they look back, really had caused a lot of problems. And we definitely don't want that. That's why we're doing this work. It's so, people can understand from the beginning, hey, you know what? I'm going to be thinking. I generally, not all the time, but generally I think before I speak. The extrovert's probably going to think out loud most of the time, and it's just a different way, and it's not a good way or a bad way, but it is, you know.
And I think, as you know, you asked about leadership earlier. As a leader, what you have to do is you have to account for both, right? So you can't create an environment where it's ideally suited for the extrovert or ideally suited for the introvert. You got to do both, right? And we have to do, you know, that's investment you have to put into it. You have to do that work in order for you to get that balanced perspective and to get the best out of everybody.
Yeah. And it's work, but it's worth it. You know, it's worth it to get to know the people that are working for you and to understand their needs and when they're going to need time to think. And that's normal. When they might be more comfortable in writing something, all of those things. It takes some time to get to know, you know, and we're very nuanced as people, you know, none of us are exactly the same. So it takes work to get to know people, but again, it's worth it, you know, especially as a leader. Let's just talk a little bit more about the characters in your book. So I think you mentioned there was a teacher. So what do either of you, what was there any experiences with teachers, or is there things that you want teachers to know about personality types?
So I guess I actually have like the exact same situation that happened in Niles happened to me. So basically in the book,
Okay.
Niles doesn't like history class because they have a lot of in-class discussions. And I remember in my freshman year English class, we were having graded discussions about these books we were reading. And I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to add, but I thought that I just couldn't, like, I thought there was no room in the conversation for me to add. So my grades, whenever one of those came up, dropped. So I guess that was the first part of the book that I wrote. So I think that I pulled from that experience when I wrote that part of the book.
Okay. And so what was your takeaway? Like, what was there things that you did to change? Was there actual conversations that happened with teachers?
Oh yeah. So my English teacher, I think, was more easily open to change than the teacher in the book was. So I just had a meeting with her and we came up with pretty easy solution to my problem, which is just, we made it so like, she told the class that everyone has to like raise their hand before they talk. And that allowed me to get into the conversation a lot easier.
Okay. And also in the book, I think it was a history teacher, right? In the book, the character, you know, ask the teacher to provide the information ahead of time, right? And I know that's key. When I got to college, I had trouble, and sometimes there was participation points, but I realized in order to be my best, I really did need to prepare for the conversation, you know, and that's something, you know, maybe a friend could be more free and not have to prepare as much. But I realized for my part, I did need to prepare, and I did much better once I figured that out.
And in the book, we try to do that. And I think we try to do that, right? We try to provide within the story, there's some lessons that can be learned, right? So within the story, there is this idea that, you know, in order, one way an introvert can do better in Socratic type discussions is to prepare ahead of time. In order to do that, you need to know what the discussion is about. But if you have the points you want to make kind of laid out, you can do it early. You can kind of get it in there. And that way, you know, interrupting is not as difficult a chore. So we try to build those examples within the story. So as you read it, it's fiction, it's entertainment, but at the same time, there's some key things you can learn, I think.
Yeah. And Joshua, your dad will tell you that that's going to apply to real life. You know, it's like you're going to have meetings, and it's going to be so much better if the leader of the meeting provides an agenda ahead of time, and you can actually prepare, because, you know, you're going to want to have a voice in that meeting, but you might need to prepare, or you might need to find your space to get in, like you're talking about, just like you might have had a struggle in the past in class. Some people have that same struggle in the work setting where they want to say something, but they don't feel like the space to get into it. And so these things that you're learning and you're also helping other people learn definitely apply to your work life that's, you know, a little ways down the road.
I think really good leaders, you know, not only provide the agenda up front, but they're going to provide some time after the meeting. So people, you need to think more, can process the information. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of lessons to be learned. We don't do things the way we should in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to meetings. But like I said, for a meeting to add as much value as it can, you got to really plan for everybody on the spectrum. And you gotta, if you have a pre-read, you still have to talk about the pre-read when you get to the meeting for the extroverts. You can't ignore talking about it because they're not going to get the benefit of just doing the pre-read. And then when you get to the end of the meeting, you think you have the answer, you'll be well suited if you give everybody some time to think about it. Cause you might discover that, you don't have the optimal solution yet. It might be fine. You might have it, but giving everybody a little bit more time to process is also a good thing.
Yeah. And making that normal, for me, I'm going to try to express fully my opinions within the meeting, but it's not going to always happen. I mean, my ideal is, I say what I want to say in the meeting, but so often there might be things after that I might want to contribute. And we just need to make that normal, that we might come up with some better things with some more thought.
Yeah.
All right. One more character. There was a counselor in there that seemed to be helpful to both the students and the teachers. Do you want to talk about that? Was there an actual counselor or just, what role could that play in a student's life or teacher's life?
I mean, maybe I'll start. We definitely want to normalize this idea that it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to get help. And in order for that to happen, we felt like it was really important to have somebody in that role within the book. And there are a few people that play that role, but having somebody like a counselor, a school counselor that actually understands personality type and can provide good advice was a good role model to provide in the book. And we felt like it was important. I know from my perspective, therapy, going to therapy helps me a lot. I'm not ashamed to say it. And having that person who understands psychology, who understands, personality type, and being able to really talk to them in a way that's non-judgmental has really been beneficial for me. But I think even at Joshua School, they have really good counselors and stuff. So I think it was something that when we wrote it, we really felt like it needed to be a character that we needed to write in a way that encouraged people to seek help and to talk about their needs and their feelings.
Okay. And this counselor also definitely brought some awareness to the teacher that the student was having a little trouble with. David, let's translate that into the workplace. How can we bring, and I know this is a lot of the work that you do, how can we bring understanding into the workplace? What are just some key suggestions that you have?
I think the first thing is, we can't be afraid to talk about personality type, right? So I see so many introverts who are afraid to even bring it up that they're introverted because they're going to be stereotyped or they're going to be pigeonholed or put, or not giving the opportunities they need to. And I think that's a mistake, right? I think you have to have a workplace where people are comfortable talking about it. So as a leader, you need to kind of create that dialogue. And I see so many leaders who have been pushed by tailwinds and they don't really realize there's a problem. So they don't even know to ask the question, right? They don't even know to have the conversation. So, if you're a leader, having these conversations about and understanding kind of when people are there at their best, especially when it comes to personality type, understanding that if somebody's introverted, they'll benefit from having a pre-read. They'll benefit from having alone time. One-on-one conversations are probably better than group conversations for them. So it's understanding that perspective really makes it better for the employees and the leaders per se. But it takes awareness, right? Because I think as introverts, we think it should be obvious, but I think our extroverted counterparts that are working in a system that kind of works for them, they may or may not even realize it. It's no fault to theirs. It's just, they're just functioning and it's working. And it's going to take some effort to kind of raise that awareness. And once again, get people to realize there's a problem, get people to realize how big the problem is, and then be motivated and, through sympathy is kind of the idea of you're aware of it and then, motivated through compassion. And then you get, becoming empathetic to your fellow workers. So you actually are willing to change the culture. I think all of that has to happen, and it's much easier to talk about than it is to do it. But I'm confident over time, we're already moving in the right direction, but I'm confident over time we'll get it there. And then maybe when Joshua gets into the workforce, in 5 to 10 years, it'll be better, right? And when his kids get into the workforce, in 20 or 30 years, it'll be even better. So that's my hope, at least.
Yeah. So what's an example of how we bring awareness? What's a kind of activity or something resource that you've seen used or you've used within your company or with other companies?
For a long time, there were mentor, I write about this in the book. When I first started, there were mentors for leadership. There were mentors for technical skill sets, but there were no mentors for, me as an introvert and learning how my personality meshed with the company and how I could, benefit and what was expected of me. That mentor did not exist, right? So we have to create these conversations within the workplace, and it can't be like introverts talking to introverts. It's got to be people talking to people. You got to have extroverts talking to introverts and introverts talking to extroverts and ambiverts in the mix. And you all have to be having these conversations. Where I worked, several years ago, we just introduced Workplace. It's a Facebook tool. It looks a lot like Facebook, but within the workplace. And we started creating these groups. And one day I just decided to create this group called Quiet Leadership, kind of based on the Susan Cain book. And we started this conversation about, here's what it means to be an introvert within the company. And these are the things that I'm struggling with. And we went from 0 members to like 3,000 members within a couple months. It was like something that kind of took off like wildfire. And when I did that, I kind of did it in conjunction with the diversity and inclusion leadership within the company, and even kind of got the CEO on board with us doing it. So we had this backing and support to have this conversation. And it was something as simple as creating a platform where people could communicate and talk about something they'd really never talked about before. And I think that's important, right? You got to have that safe place where you can have the conversation. And we use technology to do that, but there are other ways to do it as well.
All right. And so, yeah, we have to keep having more conversations, whether it's in the high school, in the workplace, with parents. This has been a great conversation. Again, congratulations to you both on writing a book together. I really enjoyed it. Is there anything else that you want to add, either of you?
Well, I just kind of reiterate as a parent, it's one of those things where it's kind of, Christmas came early for me, right? This was just something that was really a lot of work, but at the same time, I got a lot of satisfaction from it. And, working with Josh and having my 16-year-old be willing to do something like this with me, even though it may have been a little bit begrudgingly at first, really is something as a parent I'm super proud of, and I know I benefited tremendously from it. So I'm going to thank Josh for just being willing to do something that a lot of 16-year-olds would never do. So,
all right. What's next for you, Josh?
Well, in terms of writing or just in general?
Yeah, both. You're still a high school student, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you want to do after high school?
After high school, I'm going to go to college. I currently plan on going to college to study to be a chemical engineer.
Okay. Very cool. And I know you are both planning on writing more in this series of Anxiety High, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. We haven't, like I said, we haven't really started. We're still trying to market the first book and people to read it. But yeah, I think the first one turned out so well. I think that we need to. And then everybody who reads it, we get such positive feedback from that. I think when people start reading it and sharing it with others and seeing how it can actually be a very beneficial book, I think we'll definitely create the momentum and get excited about writing the second one, maybe the third one, maybe. So
sounds great. And where can people find out about your first book, David, and also the book that you've written together?
Yeah, so the two books, the titles are, once again, The Extrovert's Guide to Elevating Introverted Leaders in the Workplace, and is subtitled Embracing a Culture of Belonging. And the book that me and Josh just wrote, that's nonfiction. And the book that me and Josh just wrote is fiction for teens, and it's called Anxiety High, Volume 1. There's Nothing Wrong with You. Both books are available on Amazon. So you go to Amazon.com, you can search by title, or you can search by my name, David Boroughs, and you can find them pretty easily. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm writing articles on LinkedIn all the time. You can contact me there as well. And then we have a website called introvertsandbelonging.com, which you can go to and connect. It connects straight to LinkedIn and to Amazon. So if you want to just go to introvertsandbelonging.com, you can quickly link to either site. So
Awesome. And I'll add that to the show notes. So thank you both. It's very nice to meet you both. And it's awesome, the book that you put together.
well, thanks for the opportunity. So we do appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media channels. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code, and you can also have the option of purchasing the full report if you'd like to learn more. I'll add a link to the show notes. So many great things about being an introvert, and we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.